This video is designed to provide you with additional information about taxiing the A330 Airbus. The purpose of this program is to take a look at some of the taxiing and steering features which are unique to the A330 and to give you a greater awareness of how to minimize the possibility of a taxi incursion or departure from the taxi surface. There are several things to be aware of when taxiing the A330. First, let's take a look at the location of the landing gear in relation to the pilot's position in the flight deck. You'll notice that the pilot sits approximately 14 feet in front of the nose wheel. This will be important to remember when we discuss steering techniques. The center of the main landing gear is 84 feet behind the nose wheel on the A330-300 series, which places it 98 feet behind the pilot. The rudder pedals provide plus or minus 6 degrees of nose wheel steering and can be used at low speeds and straight taxiways as well as very shallow turns. In sharper turns, the tiller must be used. It is always recommended that the pilot keep a hand on the tiller while taxiing the aircraft, even when steering with the rudder pedals. The tiller uses steer-by-wire technology, which has no mechanical connection to the nose wheel. It is important to know that the tiller deflection and the nose wheel angle are not linear, and that the tiller forces are light regardless of the amount of deflection. Because the noise levels on the flight deck are low, pay close attention to the N1 gauges during initial thrust application. Aircraft response to thrust lever movement can be slow, particularly at high gross weights. For breakaway thrust, N1 should not exceed 40%. Any thrust setting above 40% N1 requires assurance that the area behind the aircraft is clear. Asymmetric thrust can be used to initiate a tight turn and to keep the aircraft moving during the turn. It is important that once a turn has been started, you avoid stopping during the turn because of the excessive thrust required to get the aircraft moving again. Because the main gear is so far behind the nose wheel, the inside main gear will always cut the corner and track inside of the nose wheel track. The following example demonstrates the fact that more oversteer is required than you would often think. The pilot turning off runway 12 right in Minneapolis thought he had negotiated the turn properly. Yet, with closer review, we can see how close the main landing gear comes to the edge of the taxiway. In this case, we can also see clearly how the right main landing gear is also on the center line. With a distance of 35 feet between the main landing gear, the inside main landing gear is right at the edge of a 75-foot taxiway. For this reason, oversteer must be used to avoid exiting the pavement area. When taxiing on a straight taxiway, the aircraft will be properly aligned on the center line when the center line is lined up between the PFD and the ND. When making a turn of 90 degrees or more, you should maintain an aircraft taxi speed of 10 to 12 knots. If throughout the turn at any time your speed should fall below 5 knots, additional thrust will be required to prevent the aircraft from coming to a stop during the turn. Differential thrust can be used when required, but differential braking is not recommended due to the excessive stress it may cause on the landing gear. As a reminder, it is not permitted to make a braked pivot turn where the inside main gear is fully stopped. To determine where to begin a turn of 90 degrees or more, it is important to remember that oversteer is required. Since the pilot is seated 14 feet ahead of the nose wheel, you would almost need to double that distance past the center line of the taxiway you are turning onto in order to properly execute the turn. One way of doing this would be to note when you pass the center line of the taxiway you are turning onto. The center line should intersect the fuselage around door 2 prior to initiating the turn. Depending on the width of the new taxiway, this could have you almost even with the farthest edge of the taxiway when you start the turn. If you need to make a 180-degree turn, it will require more than a 150-foot wide runway or pavement area. The following graphic out of the AOM Volume 1 details the geometry of executing a 180-degree turn on a runway. Note that the cockpit is over the edge of the runway and the aircraft pivots around a point 8 feet outboard of the right engine. The track of the nose wheel is 30 feet beyond a point where the wingtip passes over. Wingtip clearance is a very important issue in the A330 Airbus. Maintaining a good awareness of your wingtip positions at all times and how they will track across the ground is essential. The wingtips extend outward for approximately 100 feet from the center of the fuselage. When seated at the flight deck, try to visualize an extended line from each wingtip that will help you determine if the area ahead of you and around you is clear. Remember, if you do not use enough oversteer while making a turn, especially in congested areas, the arc of the inside wingtip may not be clear. When you park at the gate, you'll usually need more oversteer than you think you do. Remember, the wingtips are nearly 100 feet to the tip from the center of the fuselage. As you can see in this situation, turning too early can result in improper alignment and the possibility that a wingtip could strike a nearby object. If ever in doubt, stop the aircraft and call for a tug.